I'm a master trainer and Resolve, and I'm getting an echo. Is that better? That's better. Good. No, I'm still getting it. Jake.
Hello.
Jake, can you fix the echo? I'm getting double bubble.
Where are you getting it from?
I'm hearing about a 4-second delay.
Have you got the YouTube link open?
Don't know. Just quitting the YouTube. Is that it? That's better.
All good?
Sorry, guys.
No worries.
Yeah, rid of that. Yep. Nah. Sorry about that false start. We'll start again. My name's welcome to this virtual event in association with CVP, who are running it, and Blackmagic Design and Soho Editors, the agency and training center that I'm part of. So we're here to look at a bit of Fusion for editors. I've got a nice sci-fi movie that we're going to do some effects work on. We're going to do some repair work and shots. We're going to build some 3D graphic elements, and we're going to see how it works in conjunction. Fusion works in conjunction with the other areas that we've got of the software. So just to start with that, we've obviously our media pool, wrangling, smart pins for organizing that. We've got two different cutting environments, editing environments. This is the new one that they've added, cut page, and this one will be very familiar to editors who have applications, but it behaves very similar to those. And then we've got the Fusion page. We're going to in detail. A little bit of color page will also come into it. And then, of course, we've got the Fairlight page, which is designed for you to be able to do scaled audio work and so on. And then finally, we've got our delete page where we can set up. So that said, let's have a look at the film, play through the first 20 seconds of it or so. So it's a nice sci-fi movie made totally within Resolve software. So you've got these shots of people in their boxes getting broken screens and so on in jeopardy. And this is the clean plate we're going to use for the first effect shot. We're just going to use that and create some graphics that look a little bit like these. So if I want to create something more than one layer that's going to go into Fusion, if I can just jump straight into Fusion and that will be loaded up. If I've got my playhead over the top.
One quick thing,
yeah.
Your audio keeps cutting in and out. So
okay.
If you
get closer.
If you go back, either getting closer, or if you go into Discord, you can change your pickup levels, and that might help as well.
Let's have a look. Oh my god!
All right, I got the mute. It's all good. Okay, so if you go into the little cog.
Yeah, into the cog. Yeah.
The other one in the bottom left. Sorry.
Sort of bottom left. That one.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then you go to voice and video.
Yep.
And then where if you scroll down where it says automatically determine input sensitivity. So up there, that one there. Yeah. So if you click the toggle on the right, and then you drag it down, drag it other way. So to about if you talk in as quiet as you think you're going to talk, you can see your level adjust. So if you drag it down like way more.
Hello.
Way more. A little bit about there's probably hello. Yeah. There's good.
Hello. Good. That right?
That should help. Yeah.
Good. Brilliant. Sorry about that. Hopefully you can hear me, see my cursor move, and all of those good things. So yeah. So we're going to work on this shot. Because I'm in an editor, I'm just going to use the editing tool set to put the two elements together. This is the element we need to use. So if I play that through, you can see we've already built a graphic element in Fusion, and now that's going to be comped over this element. To do that, I'm just going to mark X to part an in and out over the top of it, and use the shortcut F12 to do a place on top edit. Now they're together and in the sync, which is obviously useful before I start the composite. I can now right click and go to new Fusion clip. And you see it gets the Fusion icon now. I park over it. And as soon as I go into Fusion, that will have built me a composite straight off the bat of what I need. So I've got two inputs into a merge node at the moment. I'll just put my foreground, which is denoted by the green input. up the top and my background down the bottom. If you right click, you can also rename them from there. But a good shortcut to remember is F2 that gives you the naming function. So I can call this one my background. So I just call that the background, and that one I'm going to hit F2 and call it the HUD so that we know where we're at. Now a merge node in 2D merge node, it will only combine one foreground and one background. If you need more than one foreground element, you need another merge node. But between the foreground and background now, I can start building up my effects for this. Maybe the first thing I should do is select the merge node, and in there I'll change the apply mode from normal to screen, and that will allow me to take out all the black element of that graphic and see it. So now if I press play, we've got that graphic. Now we want this breakup, this graphic to be breaking up and dysfunctioning. So we're going to go towards that as the look for it now. So first thing I'm going to do is select this node. Now, before I go down that road of sort of building this effect, I'll just introduce a little bit of the interface. So we've got a media pool. That's the same media pool through every room, and that gives us the ability to bring elements directly into our comp straight from that. We've got an effects library with lots of tools and templates in it. You can see we've got a raft of tools. Just by going through each one of them, you can see them. Now in Fusion, each one of these creates a node, and each one of those is a very specific tool. Next to it, we've got a clips list view. So that means that I can get to shots without and start working on the next shot without having to go via the editing page to get to it. We've got a spline editor for editing our keyframe animations. We've got a keyframes for adjusting the timings of those animations. Obviously a metadata field for understanding what we're looking at. And of course, an inspector that hides and reveals and allows us to adjust anything we've got selected. Along the middle here, we've got all the core tools we might need. They're not the full set. We've got the full set up in our effects library here. But it does contain the core ones we use a lot. So this is our background and paint tools, text, 2D text. This is our color correction tool set. This is our compositing and merges and transform tools. We've got our masking tools for polygon shapes and Bezier tools there. We've got 2D and 3D particle systems available here, which are brilliant and powerful. And of course, we've got our core 3D tool set, which we'll be having a look at. Now, if I want to add a node here, I can obviously drag directly from the media, from the tools chest. But if I use the shortcut Shift and Spacebar, it pulls up a search area. And I've happened to have typed in search for camera shake. So I can, if I type that in again, just type in cam, you'll see it searches through all of those. I didn't want that one. I wanted a camera shake. So I'll type that again. There we are, camera shake. I'll select that up and add that into the comp. And you see now when I press play, I've got that shake randomly going on. By adding that shake, from that, I can change the motion and the scale, or I'm just going to see if I want a camera. Sorry guys, just typing badly. I didn't want a 3D camera, sorry, hitting the wrong button. Okay, let me just do this again. Camera. Okay, I can't type for some reason. I've moved the keyboard. Not now. Go away. Cam. Let's try and type properly. There we are. That's the one I want. So I'll add that in line. And now you can see it's randomly kicking off. But if I dial in some values to change that down, calm that down, I could be playing it back whilst I'm dialing in these values. But it'll be easier if I just type them in, and it'll stop you feeling nauseous while you're watching it. So every time you type, you hit return, you'll go to the next field. So I can type in these values, 0.85, last couple of 0.661, and finally 0.25. And so now when I press play and play through that, you can see I'm getting that nice random wobble that I want. I'm going to go to switch it to square wave, so it'll start bouncing around the corners. And I can say use a square wave, and I can say let's use the nearest neighbor, so it's randomly breaking up and that's looking much better. What I might do is select the merge node and scale that up a bit, so it's like so, and then I'll pick up its controller, on-screen control, and get it over her face. So that's cool. Now we can add some more nodes in there. So I might select that one and go shift spacebar again and add a lens reflection node. And as soon as I do that, you can see it kick in on here. I might brighten that up a bit, make that more part of the graphic effect. And now we're getting somewhere. Maybe after that, I'll add some scan lines. So shift and spacebar again, type in scan. There's my scan lines instantly in view. Because I'm seeing this media output, let me explain that. Just to know that you've got two viewers in Fusion, and it's up to you to decide what you want to see in each viewer. If I select this HUD at this level in the graphic and hit 1 or click under the dot on the 1, you see I've now loaded that element from that position in my composition into that timeline. So I'm looking at this output, final output here, and the very beginning over here. And you can choose what you're loading up and when. So I'll be doing a lot of that during the process of this. I'm going to go to the scan lines, and I'm just going to make them slightly subtler. I think that will be work better. And maybe as a last part, I'll add a lens blur on that so that we've got it diffused, so it's in the foreground, just a suggestion of those lines. So now we are really getting there. Now, once I've kind of got the look right, now I want to accentuate the breaking up effect on the overall graphic. And that I'm going to do by adding a behavior effectively to any parameter I want. We call them modifiers. If I want to do that, all I need to do is select the merge node, go to my gain control and right click on it and go to modify with a shake option. And now if I play through, you can see that shake is working. If I now go to the modifier tab that appears in the inspector, as soon as you do that process, then I can see how I can change the parameters. So I'm going to lower the smoothness, and now we'll have a proper breaking up screen. I can obviously change the random seed and it will be working in a different organic set from that start point. So we're getting somewhere. I'm liking that. Now, the next thing we need to do is add a new element. If I show you as she's playing back, she looks down into the corner of the screen, and that's because she's worried about a crack in her visor at that point. So we're going to use that as a dramatic moment, and we're going to add the graphic in at that point. So I'm going to go to the media pool. This is the graphic I need. I'm just going to drag it into the comp. And in that comp now, I now want to add this element. If I go 1, I'll load it up into the viewer so you can see the element I'm working with. And now what I want to do is put that over the top here. So I need another merge 2D merge node to do it. Now we have those over here. I can pick it up and I can drag to the line. And as soon as it goes colored like that, I can let go. And that's been inserted into the workflow here. And I've got a foreground input, so I can just take the output, which is always the square on any node, is always the output. You've always got an input alpha channel. That can be your mask input. And of course, you've got the output going through that. And if you've got more than one input into it, you'll have a foreground and a background option. If I take the output from that source into the foreground of that media, that merge node, now it's sitting over the top of it again, and it's upstream of this work here. Now I'll just switch to screen again to get rid of all the rest of it. And you can see now we've got that graphic, all the black has been removed, and I can just use the on-screen controls to set it up, line it up with her eye line and get that to work. Now you can see the biggest problem I've got here is that my graphic element runs out once I've done this adjustment, but we have got an edges function, so I can go to that and say just duplicate out the edges after that. And now as I play through, we'll see that graphic sitting there, and eventually she'll look at it and go, I'm very scared. Now I'm going to put that out of focus a bit more, so I'm going to go to get a prism blur, which will just sit downstream of that. I just adjust that in. I'm going to make it quite deeply out of focus, still keep the crack feeling to it, but that will work much better, I think, and keep our eyes still on her eyes, which are the thing telling the story. Just to point out, as soon as you finish that shot, if I go back into the editing room, editing page and play through, you can see I'm pretty much getting rendering in real time in the background. I've turned on my smart rendering setting, so I can see that shot playing through, and literally within a second or so see my clip in context. Just to be aware, that's a playback, render cache, switch to smart or user to get that functionality through. Cool. So, beg my pardon. Nothing serious. I'll add out. Cool. So that's what we can do. But of course, as I said, we could have jumped by just going into my clips list here and jumped to the next shot we want to work on. So the next shot we're going to do is some repair work. It's this shot here. It's a lovely shot, but the director's not happy with it. Essentially, the biggest problem that they have is that if I play through, they're not happy with the eyes of the actor. The actor's supposed to have static eyes. They're obviously slightly overacting if that's the case. And the other thing that's problematic for the director is they're not impressed. If I hold down Command, I can roll in on that. And it is true. It's worth noting that Fusion has its own unique set of navigation tools in this world. So holding down Command allows you to roll in and out with your viewer, and then holding down the middle mouse button, as long as it's configured, will allow you to drag around. Uniquely in Fusion, to get out to full wide, Command F is the shortcut to get you to go to that full view in any window in Fusion. Cool. So the next thing I want to do is let's start the process by getting rid of the flickery eyes thing. I'm going to choose this last frame as my reference to use for the clean plate. Effectively, I need to create a still of those eyes. So the first thing I need to do is lock off that frame. To do that, I'm going to do Shift and Spacebar to pull up my tool search, and I'm going to type time to get a time stretcher into that comp. As soon as I do that, by the way, if you have one selected, it will add it in line. But if you just click anywhere in the comp, it will put it wherever you've decided. Now, of course, this needs a source. So I'm going to take the output from that background plate into that element. And I'm going to tell it what frame it's using. So it's using 773. I'm going to dial that in 773 and hit return. And now if I select that node and I'll click under in the 1 to load it up, when I play through now, I've got that frame locked off, and I'm in good shape for the next stage. The next stage I want to do is, now that I've isolated them, I need to isolate just the eye part of that, so I can then just put those eyes back over his face. So to do that, I need a map control tool to be added downstream, so I can add masks and garbage masks to it. So I'm just going to find that. So I'll type mapped, and there's my map control tool, and I'll add that in, and there you go. So that's the map control tool ready for the mask. Now I've got all my masking tools here. I'm going to just add a polygon shape, but the easiest way to do it is just drag one in. Don't attach it to the map controller yet. It's easier to draw it first and then go on with that. So I'll draw it now. I'm going to use Command to get in on my eyes. I've got in a nice close shape there. So now I'm ready to draw. And with the polygon shape, I can now just click, drag the Bezier handles. If I click and drag in the direction I want those handles to turn up in, I can get the exact shape I want. And then to close it, you've got to get that circle icon. And now I've closed the shape. Just to be aware that just by lassoing, I've got group selection. I can change all the things about it without any problem at all. Maybe bring those points in a bit and so on. Once I'm happy with that shape, to add this polygon into the map controller, you can see you've got lots of inputs and an output there. It can be confusing. A really nice shortcut trick is to take the output from the node you want to plug into another, and then hold Option as you drag it over the body of that node, and then release, and it will give you what options you have to plug into. I want this to be a garbage map. So as soon as I do that, it's plugged in. Now, if I hit 1 to load the map controller up, I can see that working nicely. It's the wrong way round. So to do that, I'll go back to the polygon and invert the mask. And then while I'm here, I'll add some softness so it blends back down to the eyes, the comp underneath. So that's good. If I go back there, Command F, we can see that I've got a nice plate to go back over the face, but now I need to capture the motion of the face so I can put that back over. So to do that, I need I'm going to use what we call a planar tracker, which is a very powerful tool. Just to show you, if I go to my effects library tools, at the bottom of there's my trackers, and I've got a camera tracker, which is brilliant for mapping 3D into 2D. I've got a planar tracker for this purpose, and I've got a general purpose 4.1 point tracker as well. So to do this, I'm just going to pick up the planar tracker and drag it into the comp. You see the colors going like so. So now that's in line and ready to work from this background plate to work on it. And now I'll just hide that effects library, and I'll select that and hit 1 to load that element up into the viewer there. This is the best frame to work on, the last frame, so I'll park on that. And now what I want to do is draw my shape. I'm already in plus mode, so I don't need to do anything more than just as I did before when I was creating a shape mask, just draw around the bit I want to capture the motion of, and then close the shape. And maybe I'll move those in a little bit like so. Once you're happy with what you've drawn as the shape, you need to set that as your reference time. So I'll hit that, and you see it's seeing the right reference time. You can track forward or backward over the whole thing, or track from forward and backwards. So I'll use this one. It will cover the whole object, and you can see those track points automatically grabbing every ounce of motion in that object. Now, once I've got that motion data, there's the planar tracker. It's got all the data in it, but I don't use it directly in the comp. What I do is I create a transform from it. And the inspector, you can see at the bottom there, it's given me a transform, planar transform. As soon as I hit that, it creates me the motion data I need in a nice handy little node. The other thing you should know is if you want to extract any node from a pipeline, you just hold the shift down and you can drag it out. And that will be removed from the workflow now. I won't delete it because I'm going to be using it again soon. So now all I need to do is plug my isolated element into that motion data. And if I select that and go 1, now when I play through, you can see I've got that element ready to go back over the top of his face. So to do that, as I said, I've got to add another merge back into the pipeline to add another foreground. So what I could do is just drag a merge down from here. But as I said, there's a really nice trick. If I take the output from that to the last merge node I want to add another merge to, it will create me the merge and add that foreground to this background here. So I've got this selected over here. If I select the original one now and hit 1 now, I've loaded the original one, so we can look through and see. And over here, you can see the eyes are flickering around. And yet over here, we can see the acting has considerably improved for this moment in the film. So that's good. Now we want to get rid of this ineffectual scar makeup that the director isn't happy with. So we're going to start another pipeline underneath here. And the first thing I need for that pipeline is another one of these stretch tools. So I'm going to copy that, Command C, just click where I want it, and Command V to paste it in there. So that's good. It needs the same source, so I'll plug that into it. And now that's given me another frame of this locked frame. And now I've got to do the repair work on the frame. So I need a paint tool. So downstream of that, there's my paint tool. Now, when you've got anything selected, if I just click on the tool in the tools bar, it will be added in line, which is great. And then I'll hit 1 to load the paint tool into viewer 1. Now, importantly to remember when you're using the paint tool, we've got lots of different options up here, but actually the one that works to paint over all the frames is my stroke tool. So I activate this fourth one along, I get that stroke tool, and then I'll switch to the clone function in that apply controls to make sure I'm cloning. And then just remember you've got all your brush controls here, so I can change the size of the brush and how soft it is, which will give me better results. Now I'll hold down Command and roll in on the repair, get that nicely framed up so I can see what I'm doing. And now if I hold down Option and just click to set the source, I can just click on the scar and I'll just paint that bad boy out. So there you go. I can obviously resample a different reference point as I'm going along to just make sure. I'll do it very quickly. Just make sure we're not getting any horrible patterning that looks like it comes from these things. I'll take the that to remove the makeup inside that shadow area. And there we go. I'm not going to worry too much about it. I might get rid of that line there. That's a horrible one. Command F at the other end, and there's my repair. So now it's got the same predicament as over here. I've got the repair now. I've now got to get a mask to isolate just that repair area. So again, I'll add a map control first to allow me to add it in. So there's my map control. And now I need another polygon. So I'll bring in the polygon shape. Again, not plugging it in yet. I just want to use it to draw around my dude's head. So I'll come out a bit from there and I'll just click to isolate the area that I want to patch over and build another shape for that. There we go. Maybe take those guys out a bit. So I've done my shape, and just like before, I'll hold Option down and drag to the map controller and set it as the garbage mask. And now if I select that and hit 1, that's what we're getting. Again, polygon, invert the shape, and I'll give it some softness to make that work. And there we go. Now we've got that element working. Now all I need to do to get that to work is I need another one of these planar transforms. Because I didn't delete the data that I got from that first process, I can use that again. So I'll just select it, create another transform from it, and then bring that down here to use for this object. So I'll just plug that into the planar transform, hit 1 on that. And now you can see, again, we've got the motion coming back in on that batch. And now all we've got to do is add it in line before we get to our media output. So again, I could drag down a merge node, add it in, and then just put this one in. But I'll just take the output from that to the last merge I want to add another merge to, and it will create me that merge. And now that is putting my scar and repair back over the shot. If I load media 1, my source into 1 now, we can see the before and after of that repair work. So as I run through it, you can see we've got all of those repairs done. If I dive out into my edit page and just go through here, you can see it's just baking in the renders. And I can see that in real time. Sometimes I'm getting real time out of my place. It depends on how it's caching and what it's doing, but I'm getting a very good response out of that. It's virtually in the bag straight away from that shot. Now I'll go back into my Fusion page just to point out that, yeah, I can dive around inside Fusion without going out there. So the next thing I'm going to do is a little bit of 3D graphic work. So we're going to jump to this next background plate here. And I'll hide those clips away. And what we've got here is a nice revolving background plate of a planet. We're going to put some 3D text over that, the name of the show. So let's set about that. Now, as I said, we have got in our effects tool chest, tools 3D, you can see in lighting, materials and textures, we've got an enormous set of tools for that. But we've got our core ones over here. And I just want to create some 3D text. So I can very simply just click on the 3D text icon. That'll add a comp in. Now I can add a 3D merge. The difference is between a 3D merge and a 2D merge, like the ones I can get from here, is that a 3D merge can have as many things into it as it needs in that 3D environment. So I can add a camera to it. I can add lights to it. I can have as many of those as I want. And objects. If I wanted to take 2D into 3D, there's a 3D plane, so I can map my 2D onto a surface if I want, and use it in 3D, true 3D compositing. the last thing I need to add, I've added a spotlight. Last thing we always need on the end of any 3D pipeline is a render 3D output. And that basically takes whatever we've done in 3D back to 2D so that it will work when we feed it back into our output, into the timeline. So let's set about building the text. So the text we want, the film's called Hyperlight. So I'll let's try typing Hyperlight. So we got the name of the project. If I want to see that, I can just hit 1 to load that up into the viewer, and I can see it there. If I hold down the command key, I can roll back. If I hold down the shift key, I can nudge left and right to get whatever angle I want on that. I'll have something like that, probably, maybe something like that. So you can set up what you want as a view there. Now, that's all good. Maybe I'll pick up the planet's color as well. So I'll pick up my pipette and just sample that blue of the planet. That'll look good and help with the design side. And because I want it to be 3D, I'm going to go to my extrusion down here. Now you can spill open and close these areas, but if you double click on them, you can open and close them too. So I'll open up my extrusion area here and just drag in some extrusion, and you can see that showing up in my viewer over here. So we've got some nice 3D text. We're going to do some more with it. Now, one of the areas of confusion with 3D is when you look at the render output tool, you're going to immediately get confused when you load it into viewer 2. If I hit 2 now on that to load it up, it looks completely empty. And that's basically a characteristic of Fusion, that by default, every element you put into it is by default in Z space at 0. So it's in exactly the same plane as the text at the moment. If I select the camera, you can see now I've got my camera icon there, and I can use the on-screen controls to pull it back. And now we're seeing that coming out of the render output. I can do it on the on-screen controls, or of course, I've got the same control in the inspector to just zoom that camera back out and get my text nicely positioned. So that's good. Same happens actually if I select the render tool. One of the things that it defaults to is it doesn't turn on the lighting effects by default. You have to enable it in the output render. And when I do that, you see it's instantly thrown into darkness, but it's for the same reason as the text. If I select the spotlight, you can see the spotlight is again sitting on Z at 0. So if I pull that back, that's when I'll see its effect on the content. And again, I'll pull that back. So it's just like so. And maybe I'll dive into the main control set again and change the parambular angle and the drop off feeling and cone angle and so on. I can really design what I want to happen at that point. So there we go. We've got a nice piece of text. Now we might want to animate the elements in that text, and we can obviously do that as a global move on all the text, but we might want to also do that animating each character rather than all of the characters. So if I select the text tool, to do that, what I want to do is right click in this style text area. So I'll right click in there, and then it says follower, and a follower is what we need. So if I click on follower, now it adds a modifier tab to that inspector, and in there is where I've got all my follower parameters to play with. So I can go to my transform area, open up my rotation area. I'm going to set a nice keyframe for this to end at on frame 32. So when I'm happy with where I'm at, I'm going to just add a keyframe for it all facing forward at that point. Now I'll just go back to the first frame, and in that Y channel, I'll dial in -90, and hit return. And you can see all my text as characters individually facing the camera. So now when I play through, you can see they're all turning nicely and behaving well and coming to me in light. But we want it to offset those. So I'll select the next text tool. If I go into my modifier tab, I have to double click to expand it, of course. If I go back into the main view of it, there's my delay parameter. So I'm just going to put in a value. It could obviously be different if you wanted to extend the length of this offset that you're putting in the animation. But now when I play through it, you can see that my front text finishes its move before the end text gets there. So that's the kind of animation we want. And that'll do for now. And now what we want to do is maybe animate some of the other elements in this graphic to make it look good. So I could go to my spotlight and go to its geometry, its transform values. There's where it's set. That's where I want it to be at the end. I've already done that work. So I'll set a keyframe there. And then I'll go back to the front and dial in 0 there. Hold on, 0. Hit 0 in there. There we go. And now as I play through, we're getting that reveal, the little light effect happening as well, which is adding to the design. And maybe finally, because we're working with that 3D thing, I'll go to my extrude value at the bottom. I'll select the text. There's my extrude value. So I want it to be fully extruded by then. And then I'll go back to the first frame again and bring that out. So now we've got a nice slither effect on it. As I press play, you can see it's growing, building, and turning towards us in a lovely style. So happy with that. Now I've obviously got to put that over the background that we had. So again, just the old slower way, I'll add a merge node in and plug the output from that text into the foreground of that merge node. And now if I select my media output and hit 2 to load it into viewer 2, we can see that now animating over the background as we want it. I could clearly, I've gone a bit too far on my angle. Oh no, maybe I've just not typed the full word. No, I've got the type. Yeah, so I would probably adjust that fall off to get my text back in. And do that, yeah, do something like that to make sure I'm not losing words. So there we go. I'll play that through again, and you can see I'm getting much nicer now. Good. Now, if I wanted to, one of the things that I might want to do is maybe drop this behind the horizon line. We've got a nice horizon line to work with there, so we could decide that that was the case. At the moment, I'm using the standard font that we had, but if I wanted to, obviously I could add to that as well. I forgot to do that, so I've got a font in there. Oh, undo. I've got a font in there called Tesla, so if I type Tess quickly enough, it will take me to Tesla, and I'll node that up. Yeah, that was an error, so I've made that a little bit too small. There we go. So I'll go back over here, go back to my end position. Let's see what we're getting. So I would have to adjust my spotlight, etc., to come out wider. So as long as I'm on the same frame, obviously I can update that position. So I'll go to, and I'll make sure that I'm wide enough to see my text. There we go. So let's have a look through. I'm happy with that. So now I'm going to, as I say, bring the background back over the top again so that I can hide this behind the horizon line. So to do that, again, I need a full plate of this over the top of everything before I add a mask. So I'm just going to add the output to the last output I want to add it on. And there's another merge node. And this is my foreground into that merge node. We can see nothing of our text now because I haven't actually isolated anything. So I'm now going to add a polygon shape. And just as before, I'm not going to add it in. I'm just going to draw the shape, add the Bezier handles as I need them to get it to curve around that shape, close the shape off again. I'll go Command F to get full size. And now I don't need to do anything more than just drag to that matte input to get that to work. And you can see it's now slicing out that planet. I can add some soft and maybe roll into that area where I'm working with these angles to just say how much of that atmosphere is working to hide that text. We want the planet to be opaque, but to still have that softness coming through. So now if I look at that, you can see we've got the general idea of that sort of comp. And of course, as soon as I dive back into my working environment, there's the text rendering in. Now, if I wanted to actually use this as a template animation to work with my text, I don't want to save it with this background, and I want to save it as a template to work in either my editing templates area or my Fusion templates area. One of the nice things you can do as a graphic artist is create a template, create macros that you're setting up, and then just publish the parameters you want your editor to be able to play with to make make that work, but not break the design element. So that's a nice thing. Also be aware that obviously within the collaborative workflow within Fusion, you could be editing whilst someone's doing the composite shots for that timeline, whilst you're color grading those elements, or other people are grading those elements in your timeline on the same timeline. A really slick workflow for combining. When we're all in the same room again, that will make a lot more sense. Okay, so that's what we can do. But to now, I want to make this a macro. As I say, I don't want these elements. So I'm just going to select the bits I do and go Command C to copy them. I'll dive out into the editor because I want to add to my timeline a Fusion composition. So I'll go to my effects library. In there, I will go to my open up the tools box, go to my effects area here, and there's my Fusion composition. And the easiest way to add it to the end of the comp is just drag it directly from there over into the timeline viewer. There's my append to end function. So I'll just drop it on there, and I didn't have to reframe or re-rack or zoom out or anything like that. Just did what I wanted it to. Now I'll park over it and go into Fusion. And you see with any Fusion composition, it only gives you an output. It's assuming you're going to create what you want in there for that purpose. So I'm just going to go Command V now and paste that in. And then I'm going to plug my render output directly into that. So now you can see that 3D text. If I play through it now, we're going to have that animation as we liked it going through. So this is ready to be made into a template or into a macro first, which is the stage 1 of the process. So let's do that. To do that, I've just got to select them all, right click on one and go macro, create macro. So that will give me all of the parameters now that I can publish back out in that text design. So I'll look at the various options. I'll obviously need the media output. That's already ticked, so that's good. I'll go to my spotlight and enable the output of that. I want the control set to be going out as well. So I'll publish all of those parameters to play with. That's good for the spotlight. Let's have a look at the camera 3D. I want that to go out as well. I don't need more refinement than that. The merge 3D clearly needs to be output as well. And then obviously I want to adjust my text output. So I'll set that up and make sure that I'm getting the core values of what I need to adjust just set up in there. Once you've got all the things you want to save as the macro, one of the strange things is it doesn't give you a save area until you close it. As you close it, it prompts you to save it. So then you hit yes to save it. I'm not actually going to save this one because to refresh, to get it to turn up in your system, you have to turn off, close out, resolve and refresh. Obviously that's not a good plan here. So I've made one earlier, but just to point out that all I did was save it into this area. If you go to the drop down here, you can see all of these template areas are built into your user library, application support, DaVinci Reline, DaVinci Blackmagic Design, DaVinci Resolve, Fusion, and then into that macros area. I've got a couple of shortcuts here, so you can see there's the Fusion template put in, and if you go to your editing one titles, that's where you can add it as well. So it'll turn up in your titles area in the edit page for your Fusion, for your editor's graphic deployment. So all good. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to close that off. But as I said, I made one earlier. So if I go to my effects library templates, there's the hyperlight. And if I just drag that into the comp and hit 1, I can load that up. And now we'll see a very similar animation taking place across both. And our work is good. So now we have that templated and ready to go into our pipeline. Cool. Very good. So now I'll dive out here. If I go back to, you can see now, obviously, all of these elements are now working directly in my timeline. But now the last mic up. Can you mute your mic? No, someone's still muted. Yeah, brilliant. Someone's muted the mic. Good. So last thing we're going to do is look at this green screen shot we've got here. So if I play through it, we've got our actor kind of looking out the window of the spaceship and obviously looking quite concerned. Be aware that you can just hit D on any element to disable and enable it. So I can check what I'm looking at and the timings and so on very easily through this process. Because, as I say, I want them to be comped, I'm going to select them both, right click and go into new fusion clip to create that. That creates you a fusion element in your media pool as well as in the timeline here. So I'll park over fusion. I've got Mike coming in again, and I'll fusion page. Someone's freaking out. Good.
There's nobody on the Discord talking, so it's very peculiar.
Really? Very peculiar. I don't know where that's coming from then, because I don't think I've got any apps that are doing that open. But anyway, it doesn't matter. I'll plow on. So that's my background element. So I'm going to put that down. That's going to be F2. That'll be the planet. So I'll put that as the planet. And this one on the foreground is, if I hit 1 to load that up, you can see that's my green screen. So I'll just F2 and go green to make clarity in that as well. Cool. So we've got our comp foreground merged with background. And obviously this time we're going to use a keyer. Now, be aware in your effects tool set over here, if I go to my map controls, there's all the different keyers we've got. We've got lumas, difference keying, ultra keying, so on. Delta key is the best kind of flexible keyer for most green screen work. Be aware we've got 4 keyers in the color area, which can do a blinding job as well. But the Delta keyer is by far the richest tool set for most tools, most workflows. I can just drag it in from that space, and as soon as I see that color turn up on the line, I can let go. If I miss it, hold shift, hover near the line, and then when you see that line, that color go in, you can let go and it'll add it in anyway. So now I've got my Delta keyer. If I hit 1, I'll load that up into viewer 1 as well. And the reason I do that is that when I pull the key, when I sample the background from over here, I'll see what I'm creating as a key over here. And if I click on this button, I can switch between the alpha map and the RGB input. Now, at the moment, it's a fully white plate, but if I pick up my sampler and sample the green, you can see now I'm seeing the alpha that I'm creating from that drag operation over here, and I'm getting real instant feedback on what the key's doing over here, and I know what I've got to do to fix it. Now, just to be aware, we've got infinite amounts of tools for adjusting our keys in different areas. We've got soft erode, blurs, and so on. We've got threshold control, erode, dilate. We've got spill correction as well, which we can dial in on this key. But also we've got that in color tools as well. If I select the color tool, you can see we could be using this as a different way of suppressing colors in spill correction too. I could be using that to suppress the blue or the green as well. So we've got a lot of options in there. In this keyer, I'm going to just fix this up by using the threshold. I can just pull in that black to bring out, and you can see I'm moving the softness, the grays, clipping those down to a nice clean black. And I'll use the white point to tonally map up the white in that key. So I've got a nice clean key. If I hold down Command, I can roll in on the edges that I'm concerned about. So these are the bits I've got to fix. And maybe to do that, I'll add a little bit of a blur to that edge. You can see that's helping a lot. Maybe I'll dilate that edge a bit more as well, eat it up, restore a fringe element to do that, and then Command F to get back out. And I think I'm sort of there kind of thing. So we're getting good, but the next thing we got to see, I'll just click in there and go A to turn that back to the RGB. Remember that toggles you between the two in any viewer. So that's good. Now, if I play through, the next problem I've got on this shot is that obviously the planet isn't moving, but the foreground shot's got a camera move on it. So we've got to marry those two elements together. And to do that, I need to capture the motion off of this green screen shot. So to do that, I'm just going to hit Shift Spacebar with it selected and type in track. I need a tracking tool. There's my tracker. I'll add it in line, and you can see it's instantly selected my track window to instantly start sampling something. Now, just to be aware, the outer box is your search grid, if you like. That's where it's going to be looking frame by frame for the pattern inside the inner box. If it sees that anywhere out here, and of course I can change that shape, etc. If you want to move it, it's the corner control is in the top left-hand corner of that inner box, and I can just pick up something that's got high contrast on it is ideally the solution. Now, if I've done that on the middle frame here, I don't want to press that one or that one because it will be using the first or last frame. I want to use these inner ones that say track from that current frame. So that will track that object through, and then I can just jump back to that frame and track it backwards. So there you go. It's now analyzing the motion of that element and giving me all that lovely data to play with for my comp. There you go. It's just warning me it's finished. And now I've got that motion data captured, but it's on the wrong element. I don't want to use it on the green screen. I actually want it on my background element here. There's the background plate. I've hit 1 to get that in there. So now how do I get my tracking data onto this plate? Well, it's easily done by adding in a transform in our comp tools here. There's my transform controls. You can see the tooltip pops up. I'll just drag that into the comp. And as soon as I see the blue line, I've now added it into the comp. And there's my transform in line. Now I want to load that into 1. So I'll hit 1. So I'm working on that transform. And then to attach the track data, all you need to do is right click on this on-screen control and go to Transform Center, connect to Tracker 1, unsteady position, and that's using that motion data. So now when I press play, you can see that background plate is now locked. If you look at this area here particularly, you can see that that's now locked into the shot. If I want to, I can obviously use the scaling to get rid of my edges on that plate, so that now when I play through, my planet's locked in and I've got all that truth in the shot. Now that's got so far, and as I showed you before, I've got color correction tools within this area to grade stuff, but of course I've got masterful color correction tools within the color page, and I've got keys in there that may not be able to do what the delta keyer does. So what we want to be able to do is take whatever we've done in Fusion as the solution or as the graphic and still be able to use it and isolate elements from it in the color page, and that's very easy to do. I'm just about to show you how. So what we need to do first is add another output into our comp so that we can take the alpha channel out as well. So I'm just going to click somewhere, shift spacebar again and type in out, and that will give me a media output. So there's my second media out, and now I'm just going to take the output from the keyer and plug that into that output. That's stage 1 of the process. Now Fusion is feeding this stuff downstream. And now what I've got to do is go into the color page, and I'm ready to go with the grade. Now at the moment, by default, it has only one input, and it's the RGB input into this node. That means that by default, anything coming in is going to be graded by everything. I'll reset that. So if I want to exploit any keys or alpha channels or masks that I've created in Fusion, the first thing I have to do in here is add a source. So I'll right click in the node area and add a source input. Now in this, the difference between the nodes in the color page and in the Fusion page is obviously each node in the Fusion page is a very specific tool, the delta keyer doing its delta keying type thing. Whereas in the color page, we move to a completely different node philosophy. In the color page, this node has in it with all of my color correction tools, and I can use all of them or just one of them in each node. So it's much more driven by what task you set within the node, not particularly what tool you use in it. So I want actually to create a new structure of nodes. I want a parallel node stack here to work with. I can right click and go add node, add parallel, or the shortcut, which is a lot faster, is Option P. So I'll do that a couple of times to create some different working nodes that I can do my different tasks in. So at the moment, they're all getting just the RGB. So I'll take the output and put it into the alpha channel of that input node. There's the blue one's the alpha channel. So I'll plug that into those last two nodes. And now they're both getting that same key from that in there. If I select there, I can go to the key view to see that view, either as gray or as black and white. Shift Z will get you out to full wide in this view option in this particular page. And of course I can turn that off. A great shortcut is Shift Option H, which toggles you to that view automatically. Now in this node, I'm going to go actually to my key channel controllers. This is the key input, and I'm going to invert that. So now when we look at that key, it's around the other way. So I've now got two different inverted versions of that node. What that means is in here, I can start designing what I want the planet to look like. So I'm going to use my offset. I'm going to pull it towards sort of a magenta-y red, really fire it up. It's an unusual planet, freaking people out. They should be scared. It's just broken them. So there you go. I've set up what I want the planet to look like in this node. And now I can step back to this node and start working the interior of the spaceship. So I'm going to lift the gain up, give it a lot more light in the mids and in the highlight area. I might pull the lift down to get some blacks back in the shot, and that's feeling quite good. Maybe I'll warm up in there a little bit in the shadows, so we've got that look. So in theory now I've got my grade here, and I've got complete control on the inside and the outside, and that doesn't stop me. If I select the mixer, which is, oh, sorry, I just jumped out of the shot there. If I select the mixer and go Option S, I'll add a serial node downstream of that, and I can use that key that I've done in Fusion again to just add that downstream, and now I'm working on the output of all these nodes again. Now I could just go to my gradient tool, because one of the things we've got as a problem is obviously the atmosphere from out here isn't feeding into the room. So I'm just going to create that atmosphere through this cheeky little gradient tool, which looks a bit like that when you see it. And I'm just going to push that into the window shape and make sure that it's properly bleeding into the room. So we've got that. Now, if I go Shift and F, that will go to cinema view. Shift Z will get me full size, and Shift tilde will hide. Well, Shift tilde should hide that on-screen graphic, or you can just switch to off. I'll turn on loop, and let's have a look what we've got out of that shot. And if I turn off loop, actually, we'll see it play into the next shot, and we'll see if we're getting somewhere on this stylized look of the thing. And it's kind of filling in. I'd probably pick up some of these different colors to make that work. Then I'll do Shift F to get back out of that full view mode, view mode. And now back into my edit, and there's my shot ready to play back virtually in real time and ready to go out to the next process. So hopefully you've seen a broad range of core things that you can do within Fusion. You can obviously do repair work on shots, fix acting and makeup problems, set problems, and so on through this enormous tracking tool set we've got within the app. You've got the ability to obviously create 3D graphics that are fit for purpose and beautiful, and then use those over and over again in templates. And of course, you've got all your core compositing tool set to be able to finish your effects work, and those effects work elements will turn up directly in the timeline, ready to go to the next stage. I hope this has been useful. Please, if you feel like you want to investigate more on Resolve or any of the things from Blackmagic Design, check out their cameras. They're awesome. Check out our online virtual training courses. While you're in lockdown, you might want to learn something new. We cover all the manufacturers and all the technology, all the different platforms of toys. And we're running short courses where you can hit the ground running when we're allowed out of this space. So yeah, please ask any questions and feel free to talk in the chat room if you've got any questions. But yeah, thank you all for coming.
Awesome, Rory.
Cheers.
That was awesome. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Yeah, guys. If you have any comments, just leave them in the Discord or put them on the YouTube video, and we'll make sure they get answered. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone.
Cheers. Bye.